Today we're going to find out what the most dangerous city is in each state. Now, I've always found this one entertaining. Not which one's the most dangerous, but how wrong people are about what the most dangerous city is in their state. A lot of cities in the US have reputations that don't really line up with the facts. A few examples are Chicago, Illinois, and Compton, California. Everyone seems to think that these two cities are the most dangerous cities in the country. They aren't even the most dangerous cities in their state. Now, they're dangerous, but they aren't as bad as people think. Compton was a freaking war zone back in the 1990s. These days, it isn't nearly as bad as it used to be. Chicago is often pointed out as the most dangerous city in the US. It isn't even in the top 25. It's only the 6th most dangerous in Illinois. Today, we're going to clear all that up, and I'm also going to tell you how much it costs the locals each year to deal with all their crime. Get it? Got it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 50, Jackson, Mississippi. Now this one comes with an explanation. The explanation is Jackson, Mississippi doesn't like to publish their crime stats. Every time I read any stats from an official Jackson, Mississippi or Mississippi page, there are no stats. And when I do find them in other places, they're usually way off, and it's because it's people's opinion. So I'm just going to tell you, in my opinion, they should be at least in the top 10. But I'm going to put them here because I don't want to guess. Jackson, Mississippi is a very dangerous city, and I don't know how much they spend on fighting crime there. 49, Honolulu. Honolulu's kind of known for its crime, but it's really not violent crime. They don't have much compared to a lot of other places. And really, when you think about the reputation they have, it's kind of shocking that they're this high on this list. With all the tourists and everything like that, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of property crime. Honolulu, Hawaii sees about 247 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and their per capita cost to fight crime in Honolulu is $528 annually. So basically, that's how much of everyone's tax dollars go to fighting crime. Number 48, Cheyenne, Wyoming. Yeah, you don't hear of much crime in Cheyenne. It's sparsely populated, everyone's packing heat, and 90% of the population is perfectly willing to have a shootout with you. This is great for your crime stats, but not too great for any bystanders. Cheyenne, Wyoming sees about 279 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents. It's every single year, and they spend about $341 per capita on crime. 47, Boise, Idaho. Another place very similar to Cheyenne, Wyoming, just a little more crowded, so I'm shocked that they have this low a crime rate, or violent crime rate, I should say. Boise, Idaho sees about 297 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $671 a year per capita to fight crime. 46, Manchester, New Hampshire. The only thing that surprises me here is this is our first New England state on here. The New England states are known for being incredibly safe. All their violence happens on the hockey rink. Manchester's a great city. I have a good friend that moved from New Mexico to Manchester, New Hampshire. It's kind of a change. That's one of the reasons he moved there. They only have about 400 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $644 a year per capita to fight crime. 45, Providence, Rhode Island. You never hear about Providence, like ever, unless you live in the city. And every time I do mention Providence, someone always tries to tell me that they got this serious crime problem. You don't. It might not be great, but compared to other cities in the United States, Providence is a pretty safe place to live. Matter of fact, they only have 401 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $1,840 per capita to fight crime every year. That's a pretty good budget, and that's probably why they have so little crime. 44, Burlington, Vermont. It's hard to believe they have any crime in Vermont, but they do. Not much, but they do have crime. Burlington, Vermont sees about 408 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $702 per capita on crime-related issues. 43, Augusta, Maine. Now, one thing I will say on this video, we're trying to keep all the cities above 20,000. In Augusta's situation, they're almost there. They're like 18,000 right now. So I'm sure there's some really small cities in each one of these states that are probably more dangerous, but we're focusing on the legit cities. But Augusta is a pretty safe city if you compare it to the rest of the United States. If you compare it to what's going on in Maine, it's kind of dangerous by Maine standards. Sadly, they just had a mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine a couple months back, and that'll probably push Lewiston up to the top of this list next year, because when you lose 18 people in gun violence like that, or 19, I don't consider the shooter a person, but when your crime rate is so low and something that tragic happens, it really jumps your stats up. Augusta, Maine averages about 447 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and it costs the taxpayers $543 annually. 42, Newark, New Jersey. I'm a little surprised at this one too. Newark does not have a great reputation for being a great place to live, and normally when it's not a great place to live, that comes with a lot of crime and a lot of violent crime. They do have a lot of property crime. They don't have a ton of violent crime. Matter of fact, they only have 490 per every 100,000 residents, and annually, per capita, they spend $2,736 on crime prevention and dealing with crime in general. 41, Fargo, North Dakota. If you've ever watched the movie Fargo, you think this is a great place for hitmen to go, but no, that's not what happens there. That was just a movie. Years ago, I saw this stat and it showed their crime rate, and their crime rate's not horrible, but it really drops during the winter months. Fargo sees about 517 violent crimes per every 100,000 residents, and they each put in about $1,514 annually to take care of their crime. Number 40, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Keeping it close in the Dakotas. Sioux Falls does have a little bit of a problem with some property crime, but their violent crime isn't terrible. As we get further on down this list, you'll see how terrible things can get. Sioux Falls sees about 538 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they all put in about $834 annually to deal with their crime. 39, Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska is so boring, crime is actually something they look forward to, just to mix things up a little bit, or at least give them something to talk about down at the diner. The last time I was in Omaha, I witnessed some crime. Actually, it was boredom. It's so boring there, it should be criminal. Omaha sees 581 violent crimes per 100K, and they all pitch in about $1,503 a year to fight and deal with that crime. Number 38, Charleston, West Virginia. Charleston surprised me a little bit. I knew there was places that had a lot more crime than Charleston. Then I kind of did a little research and realized that most of them have like 10,000 residents, so they kind of didn't fit into this list. Charleston's a nice place, but they do have a little bit of crime. They see about 611 for every 100K annually, and they all pitch in $1,850 or thereabouts to deal with their crime. 37, New Haven, Connecticut. This is another city that's got a really bad reputation. You ask anyone about New Haven, and they're going to tell you how horrible it is, or they got really good pizza. One or the other. But their horribleness doesn't come from violent crime as much as you might think. They do have a lot of property crime. That's because a lot of people there are broke. They only see 621 violent crimes per 100K, and they all pitch in $2,874 annually, or thereabouts, to take care of their crime. Number 36, Davenport, Iowa. I'm a little shocked that Iowa showed up this late in the list like this. Iowa is known for being a great place to raise family and a great place to feel safe. Apparently, Davenport's the only place in Iowa where they don't use that old phrase, "We don't lock our doors here." Davenport, Iowa sees about 657 violent crimes for every 100K, and they all put in about $2,017 to fight their crime and to deal with it. It's per capita, but if I kept saying per capita throughout this list, you'd be pretty irritated. I think I got 7 down on this list when I decided I didn't like hearing it. 35, Brockton, Mass. If you're looking for Brockton on a map, it is south of Boston. It's in Plymouth County, not in the Boston metro area. It's pretty close though. Brockton's got a bit of a violent crime thing, and it's all about their assaults, it seems like. There's plenty of other places in Massachusetts that have a higher crime rate, but when it comes to violent crime rate, Brockton's knocking it out of the park. They see about 672 for every 100K, and per capita spending is 1,571 to deal with their crime issues. 34, Portland, Oregon. I know you all wanted this one to be, later on in the list, but facts are facts. They don't have a big violent crime problem. It actually dropped quite a bit from its peak in 2021. The Rose City sees about 720 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and we all put in about 2,461 annually to deal with it. 33, Columbia, South Carolina. South Carolina is another state that has a lot of places that could be on this list, but Columbia seems to bubble up to the top. They see about 730 violent crimes annually for every 100,000 residents, and they pay almost $3,000, $2,845 annually per capita to take care of their crime. 32, Evansville, Indiana. Prior to starting this channel, I really had a different image of the entire state of Indiana. I didn't know anything about the stats. I had visited like Indianapolis, a couple other places, but I never saw much crime. I never thought they had a bunch of crime. As the years went on and I started studying all the crime, I found out they've got a few places that are kind of screwed up. South Bend ain't great, Indianapolis isn't wonderful, but Evansville has a lot of violent crime. Now in the metro areas of like Indianapolis, you do have a lot of suburbs that have some crime, but Indianapolis itself, mostly it's property crime. Evansville, on the other hand, sees about 733 violent crimes annually, and they fork over $2,643 per capita to take care of their crime. Number 31, Norfolk, Virginia. Norfolk is a pretty interesting place. Been there a few times. And I can tell you, it's a nice place, but it's got some pretty sketchy neighborhoods, and I think that's where a majority of their violent crime comes from. I mean, obviously that's where it comes from. 739 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents is what they see annually, and they gotta pitch in about $3,561 per capita to take care of their crime issues. Here's the scary part. That's not even the highest on this list. Number 30, Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix has got some crime issues. Not as bad as you might think it does, but it's up there. Phoenix sees about 808 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,298 per capita to take care of all that. Number 29, Orlando, Florida. This one sort of surprised me because everybody knows Jacksonville's kind of a nightmare and it's a lot worse. But then I found out the reason it makes this list is because Jacksonville isn't upfront with their numbers. I imagine Jacksonville should go on this list someplace, but I don't want to guess. I've seen different reports that said Jacksonville gets like 850 every year for every 100,000 residents, and I've seen them as high as 1,200. So we'll just stick with Orlando, call it good. Orlando sees about 818 violent crimes for every 100K residents, and they spend $2,130 per capita to deal with it every year. 28, Atlanta, Georgia. Not surprised, they got some pretty rough areas. I honestly would have thought they'd be higher up on the list, like worse, but here they are. Atlanta sees 884 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend a whopping $4,215 per capita to deal with it every year. They're still not the worst. 27, Buffalo, New York. This is another one in the early days when I really didn't know all the stats. I just knew the cities. I thought Buffalo was an okay place to live. I have family that live up by there. I've been to Buffalo, but here they are. They kind of suck. They see about 943 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $3,820 per capita a year to deal with this. 26, Philadelphia. Little surprised it's not higher up on the list, but I'm just going by the numbers, not my opinion. Philadelphia sees 953 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $4,755 per capita to deal with it. 25, Wichita, Kansas. Wichita, a little surprised here. They see 965 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,719 annually per capita. 24, Salt Lake City. This is another one that surprised me. A couple of years back, I was doing a video and I looked, I said, they had crime in Salt Lake City? Who would have known that? I mean, except for the people living there. Or stat nerds like myself. Salt Lake City sees about 969 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,421 per capita on dealing with their crime. 23, Louisville, Kentucky. Now, it looks like Louisville or Louisville, and that's what a lot of people call it if you're not from there. And if you want to anger the locals, call it Louisville. They got their country twang on when they say it. It's Louisville, and I can't even say it good. Regardless, they get about 981 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents every single year, and they spend about $4,105 per capita to deal with their crime. 22, Billings, Montana. Sort of surprised at this one. But here is Montana finally. Billings has been blown up over the last handful of years, so they're going to have some crime. Billings sees about 1,054 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $1,870 per capita annually to deal with their crime. 21, Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, every city, every state, every town has its good and its bad. I find it very difficult to find good things about Tulsa. Never been a fan of this city. I know a lot of people do love this city. I just don't. Tulsa sees about 1,107 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,992 per capita on fighting crime. Number 20, Winston-Salem, North Carolina. North Carolina had quite a few that almost made the cut as far as population goes, but Winston-Salem shows up here. They average about 1,150 violent crimes per every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,742 per capita to deal with all that nonsense. Number 19, Tacoma, Washington. Yes, for those of you that are unaware, Tacoma is actually worse than Seattle. And they see 1,182 violent crimes per every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $3,041 per capita annually to deal with all their crime. Number 18, Wilmington, Delaware. Surprise, surprise, Wilmington is not as bad as it used to be. In the last 3 years, they've made a lot of progress when it comes to violent crime. Their property crime, it still sucks. Don't leave your car out in the open. Their violent crime is about 1,201 for every 100,000 residents. And they spend about $1,877 per capita to take care of their crime, and looks like it's working. Number 17, Houston, Texas. Yeah, Houston's a bit of a nightmare these days. It has a lot to offer, and it's got a lot of good things going for it. It's just their crime's been climbing in the last handful of years, and it shows no signs of getting any better. Right now, they see about 1,211 violent crimes per every 100K, and they spend about $3,503 per capita to take care of that crime, and it keeps going up. I think they need to spend more money. Number 16, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This one is a little surprising because Baton Rouge is known as being one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. A lot of that reputation comes from their high crime rate, and mostly it's, again, property crime. But their violent crime rate is nothing to sneeze at. They see about 1,212 violent crimes per every 100K, and they spend about $5,739 a year per capita to take care of all this crime. Maybe that's why their violent crime rate isn't as high as it used to be. Number 15, Las Vegas, Nevada. You know, I did a little extra research on this one because it seemed a little off. I knew they had a lot of property crime and a lot of, tourists being taken advantage, things like that. I didn't know they had that high of a violent crime rate. North Las Vegas did. I didn't know about Las Vegas itself, but here they are. They see about 1,240 violent crimes per every 100K, and they spend about $4,470 annually per capita to deal with all that. Number 14, Pueblo, Colorado. It's been some time since I've been through Pueblo, Colorado. Never spent any, length of time there, but when I went through it, it looked kind of decent. It's been years, like I said, but yeah, they have always had a crime issue. They see about 1,253 violent crimes per every 100K, and their per capita spending on crime is $4,396 annually. Number 13, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Minneapolis is another city that sees their crime rate drop during the winter, so they're getting all their violent crimes done in the summer. And during the summer, I guess, they see about 1,281 violent crimes per every 100,000 residents. Actually, that's all year, not just the summer. I'm joking. They spend about $3,934 a year per capita to deal with all their crime issues. Number 12, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Again, this is one I thought would have been at least in the top 10. They almost made it. They're number 12, but Albuquerque's got some serious crime issues. As I dug into it, Albuquerque does have some violent crime, but a lot of their communities in the metro area have a lot of violent crime. But being number 12 on this list is no slouch. Albuquerque, New Mexico sees about 1,388 violent crimes per every 100K, and they spend about $3,872 per capita. Number 11, Baltimore, Maryland. Yes, Martha, put your teeth back in your mouth. I said Baltimore's 11, not number 2. And if your name is Martha and you did spit out your teeth just now, I'd love to hear the backstory. Let us know in the comment section below. Baltimore, Maryland is known for its crime. They've kind of excelled at it for years. Last couple years, though, it's kind of gone down a little bit. But it's still a pretty dangerous place. Baltimore sees about 1,456 violent crimes for every 100K, and they spend $7,230 per capita on crime-related issues every single year. Number 10, Oakland, California. Oakland's always had a serious crime problem. I mean, there are parts that are downright scary, but if you drive through Oakland, most of it's pretty nice. But if you drive through one of the other parts, you might be able to witness one of their 1,506 violent crimes they have every year. Oakland spends $5,329 per capita on crime-related issues every single year. Number 9, Rockford, Illinois. Yes, regardless of what you see on cable news, Chicago is not the most dangerous place on the planet. It's not even the most dangerous place in Illinois. That title goes to Rockford. Rockford sees 1,534 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. and they spend $2,779 per capita on crime. Number 8, Springfield, Missouri. Springfield, Missouri has been kind of a nightmare since forever. This has been going on so long, you think they're kind of proud of it. Springfield sees 1,569 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend about $2,998 per capita. Number 7, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee is like the only place in Wisconsin that has any legit crime. I know they have crime, I've seen all the stats and I've seen all the numbers, but every time I go there, it seems like such a nice place. Milwaukee, Wisconsin sees about 1,586 violent crimes for every 100,000, and they spend $5,243 per capita to deal with all their crime. Number 6, Anchorage, Alaska. Most people don't know this, but Anchorage is a little bit of a nightmare when it comes to their crime rate. It's too bad, it's such a beautiful state. Now they do have nice areas, but most of the time, they got a lot of heavy drinking and assaulting each other. Anchorage sees 1,616 violent crimes for every 100,000, and they spend $1,680 per capita on crime. Number 5, Cleveland, Ohio. Years and years ago, before I even started this channel or even thought about it, there was a guy that I used to talk to at my gym. He was from Cleveland, and he was like the first joke I ever heard about a place, not the people. He said Cleveland's a nice place to be from, and he's also the one that told me that the best thing to see in Cleveland is the skyline in your rearview mirror. I'd never heard that before. And that joke is still good advice to this day. Cleveland sees 1,665 violent crimes for every 100,000, and they spend $6,491 per capita on their crime. Number 4, Birmingham, Alabama. For some reason, about 2 weeks ago, I was mentioning Huntsville. Huntsville is a beautiful city and a wonderful place. Then in another video, I was talking about what a nightmare Birmingham is, and some dude climbs all up my butt about it. You just said it's a wonderful place. You said it's got more doctors than any other city in the country, and he just went on and on. You're talking about Huntsville. So, no, I'm pretty sure you said Birmingham. He never emailed back, so I'm pretty sure he went and found out he was wrong. Birmingham is a nightmare, Huntsville is wonderful. That's all you got to remember. Birmingham sees 1,683 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend $7,900 a year on crime. Number 3, Little Rock, Arkansas. My biggest surprise here is Little Rock beat out Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is always one of the most violent cities in the United States. They beat Pine Bluff by like 10 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents. That number is, for Little Rock, 2,063 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents. And Little Rock, Arkansas spends $5,374 per capita on crime. Number 2, Detroit, Michigan. Even though hardly anyone lives there anymore, Detroit still got enough people to assault, I guess. Give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Detroit's population peaked in the 1950s with 1,849,000 residents. They were doing a lot for the war effort during the 1940s, so the city blew up. They were building all kinds of things. Well, the war ended and the jobs went away. They have been losing population ever since. In 2022, Detroit, Michigan had a population of 620,000. They're expected to be below 600,000 by the 2030 census, unless something drastic changes. Like maybe their crime rate. They see 2,154 violent crimes for every 100,000 residents, and they spend $6,780 per capita on crime. All right, before we get to number 1, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And if you really want to help out this channel, at the end of this video, there's some videos that are suggested. That's something YouTube's really looking at these days if you watch a second video of mine while you're watching. So if you could, please do that. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, Memphis, Tennessee. I'm sure a lot of you thought it was going to be San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles maybe. No, it's Memphis. We're talking about a city that in 2018 had 7 unrelated machete attacks. Like 2 guys getting in an argument at an intersection and one pulls out a machete and starts attacking the dude with it. I'm not talking about one guy roaming around the city with a machete, like a Jamaican Freddy Krueger. Memphis, Tennessee sees 2,431 violent crimes every single year for every 100,000 residents, and they spend $7,184 per capita on crime. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, and be nice to each other.